Welcome to This Space Between Us. These podcasts explore what is trying to emerge from within a conversation that is held in high esteem. My name is Sean Allison. I'm a medical intuitive, chaplain, and a spiritual teacher at Journey Within in Lakewood, Colorado. Well, my guest today is with Natalie Cutsforth. I met Natalie several years ago, I think all the way back to 2000, where we met at the Interconnection Institute, a space for spiritual, psychic, and personal development. And speaking of personal development, I really admire Natalie's journey as an empath over the years, and now as an intuitive healer, spiritual teacher, and a mentor for those empaths that are wanting to develop their gifts and talents. It's just wonderful to be a part of conversations to explore what healthy energetic boundaries look like. And it reminds me of a conversation that we had a couple weeks ago where I asked Natalie what were some of her takeaways that were most memorable from times with her clients or groups. I loved her response. She said, I really don't recall. I don't have a memory around them because of separating afterwards. Now, separation is a tool that we use to transition from one experience to another, from one conversation to another, and we remove the energy of that space, neutralize it to become something brand new. It's a nice bookend to do, like working with clients or a group or talking to a loved one. But it makes for a nice, clean transition so you're not carrying it over into the next conversation. So thank you for joining us, Natalie.
Thank you, Sean. I'm excited about our conversation. We always end up in some surprising spots in our casual friend conversations.
I like them too. Hey, tell me why it is so important to focus on separation as an empath.
Yeah, I feel like it all started in training, ultimately for me, just making an agreement with my own spiritual support group or my own agreement around how I get information and when I stop getting information so that I have boundaries. Because ultimately I originally started this studying that we did together where we met in Denver to learn to turn it off because I felt too overwhelmed by having that sense of sensory awareness on all the time in my life. So it was really key to my mental health and sense of happiness to be able to turn it off.
And one thing that comes to mind when we talk about this space is just being able to let go of preconceived ideas, recognizing when that intuition is engaged and when it's turned off, and also having the intention where we can be aware of the tuning in and tuning out of that wisdom or extrasensory information. I really appreciate your boundary around it.
Well, to me, it's experience of, there's this tuning into your intuition and letting it guide you, which is something that's always available. But my experience personally was that I was reading people without their permission a lot of my life before I knew what it was that I was doing. And that's different than just tuning into your intuition. when you're tuning into your own information, it's to help guide you in response to what's happening around you in the world. It's not climbing into someone's energy space to see what's going on with them, because that's something, in my opinion, we need to ask for permission to do. Yes, we can look at stuff that is regarding ourselves or what's happening between them and us in our interactions. So are they telling me the truth? What's their intentions? Is it regards to me? What am I sensing here in their energy? Those things are all fair game in my experience. But as soon as you start going into trying to see what they're thinking, feeling, getting into their psychic space, getting into their personal energy field in a way that's, I see it as sort of a violation of a person's boundaries. And that's why people get irritated or push you back away from them when you're actually trying to get close to them, if you're a natural empath and don't realize what you're doing.
I appreciate the distinction, and I think it brings into question ethics and how we can hold each other in higher esteem, and creating that space of permission and privacy. I think it builds trust, and also a deeper level of exchange that's possible.
And I also understand, I mean, a lot of us that are empathically sensitive, that was born out of a sense of needing to feel safer. Our gifts, our skills were heightened out of a need to sort of measure the world around us to feel safe. And so it's hard to let go of the habit if the habit's been created in a way that gets sort of violates other people's space. It is sort of irony, I think, that in seeking safety by using our sixth sense or that intuitive awareness, often we end up creating violations of other people's space out of fear, out of our own wounds. So yes, it is about having integrity, but it's also about feeling safe in your own space so that you can give other people their space.
Yeah, I think for me, developing this sense of awareness came from being around people whose actions and words were not as accurate as their emotions. And so I learned to gather that information on a more subtle level because I could trust it more. And I think that's where you are pointing towards the value of having that boundary, that by keeping it in check and coming from a sense of protection or safety or permission to begin with, kind of keeps it in a place where it can support what's going on rather than feel intrusive.
Completely. And it allows us to be honoring of our own needs and energies by sensing what's happening around us, but also by having a boundary with it, having an energetic boundary with it. It actually has really been the pathway to peace for me, that not having those energetic boundaries, needing to or unconsciously absorbing and reading everything around me. I like to say that a lot of us as empaths take a sample of the world around us with our own body. Like our body's this big antenna, and we're sensing their anger or their fear or their joy or their attraction or whatever that other person around us or the big group of people around us is emanating from their own energetic body. And instead of just knowing it in our awareness, we actually end up absorbing it or taking a sample of it, just like breathing the air. And that changes our very being rather than letting us stay true to ourselves, stay centered in our own energy, feel safe, feel clear, feel know what our yes is and know what our no is relative to a situation. When we're sampling everybody's energy that's around us, or even just one other person's energy, it alters, it distorts our own sense of what's true for us and what we want and need. And so even though it seems like turning it off or changing the way we relate to energy can be a loss, I also find that it's a huge gain in your own clarity. It's a huge gain in your own sense of inner peace, or at least knowing that what you're sensing is you, not someone else in your own body. And then what you're seeing, with your intuitive awareness, with that psychic mind, is the information. But doesn't need to alter with practice and awareness. It doesn't need to alter what you feel in your body, which alters what you sense is your own truth.
Oh, beautifully said. I see that by recognizing it as information, it kind of peels away the personality traits that may get kind of cluttered up in that exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can be aware of the experience I'm having and allow it to be separate than the experience that you, Natalie, are having, then I can really value and appreciate that exchange at a whole new level, because there's not a sense of enmeshment that comes from that. There's a clearer sense of my contribution and what you're providing to the conversation as
Mm-hmm.
well.
And I sort of always like to use the sponge analogy, right? So most of us who have a kitchen sponge, after a while, start noticing that it's pretty nasty, even if we rinse it out a lot. We got to let go. Maybe we need to soak it in something to, decontaminate it, or we need to just replace it altogether. And when we're absorbing the energy around us, to take a sample of it, to to read it, to know it, we sort of become like that sponge. Even if we squeeze it out and rinse it out and squeeze it out again and clear our space, often we're still a bit tainted by that energy. If we can actually learn to put a energetic bubble around our space and set some protection around our space, then we don't have to absorb it. And then that's a whole nother conversation about how to see something from a different place rather than feeling it empathically.
Yeah, because now you can experience the sponge outside of your personal space,
Mm-hmm.
and thus appreciate what it has to offer and still select what is meaningful to you.
Yeah, you can look at it and go, oh, that's what's happening here. It's not me having that experience. It's this person or this group or the collective. I mean, we've been in a major time where the collective energy has been very challenging for the empathic people in the world, including myself and yourself, to really set boundaries with. And my perspective on that is that we typically, in one time, at any given time, there is a zillion different people having different experiences and putting different energy out. And so it's a big melting pot. But then when a lot of people are having the same experience, like fear or need to be in control because they feel out of control, it becomes this mass, like I think of it just becomes this mass, and then we can't ignore it anymore. It's very obvious. It's like that big island of plastic out in the ocean or whatever. Like, we can pretend like it's not there because we can't see it from the shoreline, but it's there and it's huge. And we feel it when we're empathic. And so it's extra work to have those boundaries in a way that both keeps us feeling safe because we're aware of what's happening in the world, and it doesn't bring us down into that anger, fear, control.
Wow. And really shifting that place of focus from an external um, to an internal experience. Could you
Completely, yeah.
give us an example of how you would go about separating?
Oh, that's good. Well, so first I should say, my experience when I'm in a session where I have permission from someone and they've said, yes, please, I would like a healing. I would like you to read me and give me insights that would help me navigate my life. I experience it like I've gone into this library and I pulled a book off the shelf and it's their book and I'm opening it up. And when they ask me a question or say something about what's happening in their life and are seeking understanding, I just flip to that page in the book and I'm telling them what it says. And then when our session is done, I close the book and put it back on the shelf and walk out of the library. And I didn't memorize that book. I just looked at it and gave them the information that was in it. So as soon as I'm outside, I sort of forgot what I said, you know? So that's sort of the way I approach readings is I'm looking at their information. And when I close the session, I am actually closing the book of their soul's records, their Akashic records, and it's their information, not mine. So I don't hold on to it. My process around separating is a visualization or like I would call it more like sort of cleaning out, right? After I am in one of those kinds of readings, which is what I do a lot of the time in my life. I'm looking at the person energetically, and I'm breaking our karmic agreement and blessing them, and I'm releasing them to spirit. I'm releasing the energy that we shared together to source, to God, the divine mystery, so that it's out of my hands. I just was a vessel to assist them in that moment in their life, and it's not for me to carry. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And to add to that, I think it would bring a lot of value to the experience of forgiveness and how we can peel away our association of that wound or that experience that has affected us by being able to separate from the meaning so it has an opportunity to become something new in the way that I relate to it from moment to moment. And so I really like being able to identify what is ready to change and what I'm ready for. And using a visualization like you described, being able to um, see myself distancing from that information, letting it flow away, even returning to the earth where it can be recycled and used for something different.
When I'm in a regular life interaction, I don't go around separating with every person that I see at the grocery store or in my personal life. Um, but when I do my own energy work on myself, I do spend time being conscious of calling my energy back to myself from people that I've left it with. And I'm not taking something from them. I'm not, undoing the healing or undoing the exchange of energy that we had. I am just intentionally inviting that bit of my soul's essence to come back to me so I have all of myself. And I think often we forget that we put our energy out there in the world in exchange in conversations and connections and our work and our families and in life. And we forget that we can call our energy back to ourselves. It's such a powerful action in my experience to reclaim my energy when I don't even realize I'm missing it, I'm just going, along in my life and thinking everything is just fine and dandy. And then if I pause to, in my process of doing my own meditation, visualize a bit, calling my energy back to me from anywhere out in the future where I'm like thinking about something that's not done yet, from anywhere out in the past where I haven't, where I haven't finished something from the past, from any people. If I just bring all that energy into the present moment, it is such a relief. It's such a sense of wholeness that comes from that act of intentional visualizing and communicating with the energy, with my own energy out in the world.
The visualization that I just picked up on was this act of breathing, where as I'm breathing in, I'm calling myself back, my awareness back to this present moment from where it might be creating or healing, past, future, back to the present moment. And then as I breathe out, I can also create distance between the experience I just had and preparing myself for a new one.
It is. I think that the breath of life is sort of our barometer for that.
How have you noticed the changes as this became a pattern, a practice? How has it benefited you? In what areas has it benefited?
Well, I would say that early on, I used to work in a corporate job. I was in tech for 22 years. And when I met you originally, Sean, I was still in that world. And there was a lot of energy happening in those environments that wasn't spoken of because, well, it's just culturally not what we do. We don't typically talk about our feelings or what's happening at home and when people come to work, or directly confront certain topics in the workplace. And yet all these people with different belief systems and different values and different lives come together and sit around together for 8 or 10 hours a day in conjunction to fulfill their job requirement. And for me as an empath, I often found myself feeling other people's energy when they would arrive at work. And that feeling of their energy often left me sort of depleted by the end of my workday. I was just not wanting to have any conversation with anyone. And so the process of just learning how to set my own energy field and, doing that on a regular daily basis before I went to work was a profoundly life-changing experience for me, because even though it sounds so simple, literally just being intentional about, here's my body, here's my aura bubble, here's my protection, I'm cleaning everybody out of my space, I'm calling my energy back to me, I'm putting up my protection, and I'm going to work. And my life really, really changed in that there was stress at work, the intensity of people's energy. I could still see it. I witnessed it. I knew what was happening, but I wasn't being, I wasn't being the sponge that was getting altered by it and having a sense of being depleted by all that energy. And it was, anyways, to me, it was the most powerful thing. The just the simple, basic act of having a pattern of being intentional about my energy and owning my space and having permission to have that space and not let other people in it, it really changed my life.
I really like that description. I've noticed that I would create protection and bring in my aura. And at times it would feel suffocating, and other people's experiences would feel kind of intrusive, or I feeling the weight of their burdens, right? And I noticed that as I practiced this managing of my energy, that I could extend it to a comfortable proximity around me. For example, with COVID, it's 6 feet, in diameter, and hold that space and still notice what was going on around me and be able to have the experience I wanted to have while valuing the experience that other people were having.
Yeah, it is. I'm in a different place in my life in the last 5 years. Since I left Denver, I've been 5.5 years now. I've been full-time working, as an intuitive healer. And so that means I'm home alone a lot, talking to people on the phone or on Zoom in private sessions. And so I'm not having to go out and be in the energy frequency of the world like I used to. And I also live in the country. So I live on 20 acres. So I have space around me. And wow, it really does make a difference. When I first recognized this years before I left Colorado, I had, typically traveled every other week for a couple decades and was on airplanes going place to place, and lived in Denver, which is, right in the middle of the city. And I started going back to Oregon to spend the summers and travel from there for my jobs. And when I would come here, I would stay on my father's ranch, which is a big piece of land with a lot of space. And I'd move, when 2 months later, I'd come back to Denver, and it would be like really energetically obvious, or the frantic energy of a city, or just all of those souls crammed into a space close together. I had to be very different around how I held my energy field, because just going to the grocery store, just sitting in my own home had different vibration, because of so many souls around me feeling and experiencing so many different things, and not having to have my boundaries so tight, when I was living out in the country. So it's wild now that I live this lifetime style all the time. When I came back to Denver a few weeks ago and we met for dinner, I really noticed that frantic energy again. And it's not a judgment, really. It's just that there's a lot of people bouncing off each other's energy fields and, sort of packed into a smaller space. And that just makes, sometimes as an energy sensitive, you feel a little bit like you're a pinball in a pinball machine. You bump up against somebody's energy, and sitting next to, while you're in your car in traffic, or you bump up to somebody else's energy, getting a cup of coffee or whatever. It's just interesting. Different boundaries are necessary in different circumstances, is what I would say from my experience.
Yeah. Kind of like the difference between driving on a lonely country road and being in the rush hour grid traffic.
Yeah, 6 lanes wide in one direction in Houston, right?
Right, exactly. Just different things to pay attention to and to manage. And so your focus is on, a variety of things versus maybe um, a smaller amount of processing with
Mhm.
less input.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something else that this brings to mind as I'm calling back my awareness, my energy, to this present moment and kind of separating from the distractions around me, I find that being an observer of what is going on has its value. Um, I'm used to being a participant and getting engaged in those invitations that the pressure, um, the distractions, and by being able to observe, oftentimes I've been able to allow what's familiar to pass and entertain new thoughts and ideas that come from holding that place of neutrality. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about how that would go into this idea of separating.
Well, I really, believe that having boundaries involves that sense of neutrality, because when we um, aren't neutral, when we judge something, or we think, oh, well, that's bad or that's good, um, we're not basically, uh, it's almost like we're going closer to it or pulling farther away from it. So there's an energetic push pull involved in the act of judgment. And when we can be neutral, it actually allows us to get, um, I don't know if the word is beyond, but what I often find in a session with clients is that they'll be telling me, this is what's going on. And I'm pretty sure this is why. And then often they're pretty sure this is why is not the reason why. Because they're not neutral about it. They're attached to figuring out something relative to the points of their consciousness. And ultimately, sometimes that often the neutrality is where the healing comes, by having someone that is neutral give you a reflection of what's happening. You actually get the insight that you couldn't reach yourself. So as it relates to separation, I'm still playing with those words in terms of the way I define separation. I think of it as like separation being what happens at the end of your agreement to do some healing work together. But if I put separation in the context of having, allowing what they're experiencing to be okay, even if it's hard to witness, that I guess is where neutrality fits to me. Like it was a big journey for me to be able to say certain things that I saw psychically to people in sessions, because I didn't want them to feel bad. And the more that I just allowed myself to say what I saw, and they validated was already happening. They already felt that way. They already had that it was right on. The more I realized I wasn't the one making them feel bad by just speaking the truth. I was actually giving it permission to exist with neutrality, and they then got to heal it.
There's something that's unique about creating experience as being an equal value as the other,
Mm-hmm.
because then we're not devaluing, ignoring, pushing aside events that are meaningful and are important, because we can have a fuller range of engagement to what's going on around us. And so the shadow parts of our lives can also bring the new virtues that are awaiting our discovery when we step into and start learning and examining our insecurities.
And in like even that word insecurity, there's this, it takes us back to the topic of safety, which is I feel like what the root of insecurity is, we're not feeling secure, we're not feeling safe, and then we put our energy, either we retract inside of ourselves in a way that makes us not be able to live fully, or we put our energy out too far to try to sort of overcompensate in energetically reading the world around us. And in either case, we're not neutral and we end up suffering.
Yeah, that affects our ability to be authentic and in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
Great examples, Natalie.
Oh,
Okay.
awesome. That was great.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I really do value the amount of energy that you've put into developing that part of your practice. And I found it very encouraging to look at how I would like to use that space moving forward. I just think that there's a lot that can go into um, whether it's a past wound, whether you're separating from a conversation, whether it's a event that needs all of my attention right now,
Mm-hmm.
that being able to manage that energy is so valuable.
It really is. It really is. And I love this kind of conversation because to me, it evokes things in me that I don't necessarily articulate unless someone asks. And so appreciate you asking great questions that helped me um, put into words what I experience. The thing about separation that I didn't mention is that often we encounter a situation in life or a person that pops into our head a lot. Like we have one person that just constantly is getting in our space that we are thinking about something else, and then they pop into our head. And I've had people ask me that a lot, like, how do I know it's not just me thinking of them? Well, I mean, there's the act of you thinking of someone, and then there's the act of you doing something else. Your energy is focused on something else, and suddenly they pop into your head. And that piece around separation and boundaries is really sort of a common challenge that so many people have that are psychically attuned, because it's very hard to turn our attunement off if a person has either has some unresolved business with us or is someone we want to have connection with. And so I find that act of separation can actually be quite challenging at times, because we have another doorway or opening in our own energy field that allows that person to pop in, whether it's a belief that we need to do something about the situation that's unresolved, or it's it's a desire to have a connection with that person that keeps the door open in our psychic space. But it is the most tricky one to separate from, I find, and often we have to do it over and over again until we find all the doors that are letting that person into our space.
For me, it really helped to practice that I can influence things within my inner world to a much higher degree than trying to influence outside of my personal space. So if I can change my mind, then that can happen whenever I decide. If
Yeah.
something is looming over me, where I'm feeling the pressure or the weight of it, then that very well could be the outside experience, weighing down on me.
Mm-hmm.
And by being able um, to change things that I'm thinking or feeling, I can identify whether I'm generating it, whether it's coming from outside of me. And that helps me be able to distinguish the difference between um, an outside influence and something that I'm generating from within.
That's a good one. Yeah, I feel that. I actually lost a 15-year long, maybe more, friendship over me just simply saying to this person that I was friends with, you know, that what you're miserable about right now is just something you believe, and it's not actually it's just a belief. It's not actually like the truth. It's a belief. And if you change your belief, you don't have to be miserable. And this, he got so mad at me. He never spoke with me again, cut me off completely out of his life. And it wasn't even like a religious belief or it was just a belief that he was so attached to that it was just constantly making him miserable. And he just wouldn't let it go. So sometimes we get trapped in our own belief systems or programming, that is hard to change our mind because it's very fixed.
I think that kind of creates a wonderful opportunity for wisdom to kind of find us out of sequence.
Mm-hmm.
It comes out of left field, kind of breaks the thought pattern that we have, and that we can introduce that and to provide a portal maybe out of that circular thought pattern
Mm-hmm.
or belief, um, so that we can bring new information in. And yes, thank you for that description.
Yeah, this, sort of to back up a little bit and mention something around people getting in your psychic space. I think it's so common when someone's attracted to someone else. Um, if you want someone to be thinking of you and they are in your psychic space, then it's great to make the assumption that they're thinking of you when they pop into your head. But I find that a lot of times it's not necessarily that they're thinking of you. It's just that they have an energy hook in your space, even if they're not communicating with you. They might be not responding to you at all. You might not have seen them in 3 years, but they could still pop into your psychic space because they're getting something from it, unconsciously or consciously, and you're allowing it because you want it to mean something different than it means. And it's a really, really hard one. It's a very, very hard one. It's even the most skilled people I know still have to work on that one a lot.
Good example. I'm thinking of how a computer, when you go on a search engine and you go to a website, the computer will remember it very quickly the next time.
Mm-hmm.
And our thoughts work the same way, that if it's something that we've taught ourselves to entertain, it will come back much easier than it did to begin with.
It's been cached. They call it caching. CACHE.
Wonderful.
when
Well,
when the data is cached, just like if you hide something in a treasure box and bury it, it's a cache. It's cached when it's we've been to that place before, so we go there very quickly the next time. There's no slow gathering of the data. It's just instant, as you mentioned.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for our time together today.
I appreciate it a lot. Thanks, Sean.
Well, I want to thank you for being on our podcast today. Where could someone find you if they would like more information on what you have to offer, or your classes, or your individual sessions with people?
My website is nataliecutsforth.com. And I am on Instagram and Facebook as Follow the Divine Mystery with Natalie Cutsforth, because I'm a big believer in the mystery as why we're here as souls is to have experiences and actually not be in control of everything that happens, but be in the mystery. And that's where the magic is, in being alive. I also have a book called Tame Your Energy Sensitivity. It can be found on my website or on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, or you can ask for it at your local bookstore. It's both paperback, or you can get it as a digital ebook or Kindle. So thank you for your time. Thank you for having me, Sean. It's been fun.
Yes, and thank you for this generous space that we could explore together. Well, we have come to the time in our conversation where we realize we should have been recording this, and we have. I want to thank Michael Allison for doing such a wonderful job editing these podcasts. For you, the listener, for your topics and ideas that help us explore wisdom, spiritual gifts, and self-care strategies. Please post your ideas at the Compassion Speak Facebook page and on Instagram. All right, until next time, put into motion the changes you wish to experience from an intimate universe. God bless, and angels all around you.